Hi, welcome to the You Can Quit Smoking podcast, where we go over stories of success with overcoming smoking addiction. Many people have moved through this radical transformation and use smoking as an opportunity for inner growth, with deeper self-awareness and a greater capacity for compassion. So many have done it, and you can quit smoking too. I'm your host, Jesse Hartnett, founder of Honor Your Heart. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm here today with John. John, welcome to the show. Can you introduce yourself?
Hey, Jesse. Thanks for having me. My name's John. I'm living in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. Yeah, I'm excited to share my quit smoking story and really hoping that it might help anybody out there who's listening who's having a hard time doing that.
Great. So walk us through your story with smoking.
I guess like a lot of people, I started as a teenager. I had this cool friend who was on the rowing team with me. I don't know how he discovered smoking, but he got me into it. I remember we would like go off into the woods to smoke at first because I guess we're like very afraid of getting caught. I think I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. The experience was really memorable because like I can still remember how it smelled and tasted and all that. It wasn't good, but it was kind of dangerous. And I think that I really liked that as a kid. And then at some point I started smoking on my own. I would take walks to the general store, still, of course, living at home with my parents who would murder me if they knew that I smoked. Neither of them did, but both of them I think were exes. I don't think either of them really seriously smoked that much. Anyway, it was a big secret. And so I would take these walks to the general store and I would smoke a cigarette on the way there and smoke a cigarette on the way back. You know, as a teenager, I guess I had like a 2 cigarettes a day habit, which is not that bad. Fast forward into high school. I'm dating myself when I say that my high school had a smoking area. So
Yeah, different times.
yeah, and I don't know where the staff went. They may have had an indoor smoking room, the staff, but the students had a smoking area out sort of aside around the corner. Again, I'm dating myself. I think high school was really cliquey back then. I'm a high school teacher now, and I find it much, much less so now. But at the time, it was Breakfast Club, right? It was like you're a jock, or you were in art, or you were a music geek, or you were, as I was, one of these like heavy metal guys or girls. And so we would go into the so-called smoke hole with our concert tees and our jean jackets and we'd smoke. And so I smoked all through high school. But again, I don't know if I was addicted in high school. I never really stopped long enough to find out, but it was very much a social thing and almost only ever smoked with friends. Eventually, of course, I graduated from high school, I went to college, and that's, I think, where I really started smoking a lot. At some point, I don't know when, but I made it up to like a pack a day smoking. It was expensive. As a student, I was dirt poor, like really poor, but somehow always managed to scrape together money to buy cigarettes. My roommate at the time also smoked, and so that probably didn't help. I think I probably made it up to a pack a day habit when I was in university. After university, now I'm a full-blown smoker and probably been going for close to 10 years at that point, probably getting a pretty good addiction by then. I moved to Toronto because kind of what you did, you would go to the big city and try and get a job. And I had a roommate and I got a job and we both were smokers. At that point, I was in my 20s and now I'm just a full pack a day smoker. Here in Canada, at the time, cigarettes were about $8 or $10 a pack. I remember it was really, really expensive. Every now and then we would come down to the States and we would load up on cartons of Marlboro Reds because they were cheap. And when they ran out, it was always a bad day because we'd have to go back to buying our $30 or $40 cartons in Canada. I take it you're in the States, is that right?
Yeah, I'm in New Mexico.
What does a pack of cigarettes cost in the States right now?
You know, I haven't looked because I haven't smoked, but it was pretty bad. I was in California. They were 10 or 12 for Marlboro Red.
Ouch. Yeah, okay. I think that they're 12 to 14 in Canada now. And I think most people who do smoke a lot have to buy them on the black market, get them cheaper. Anyway, so my roommate and I, we would often talk about having to quit because we couldn't afford it. It was probably like a $200 a month kind of habit, thereabouts, which even now would be a lot. But at that time, that was an insane amount of money. We were always thinking about quitting and talking about quitting, but we didn't. I guess it's a cheap form of entertainment and always something to do. And also, if you live with someone who smokes, I think you have to both quit at the same time because otherwise you're just constantly around it and reminded of it and tempted by it. So we would both do these things where we would cut down by 1 a day, and then next week we would cut down by 2 a day, and next week we would cut down by 3 a day. I don't know if you ever tried these kind of like weaning yourself off methods. They never worked. We must have tried that 5 or 6 times to try and like lower the amount amount to break the physical, I guess, and mental addiction slowly. For some reason, I never went with gum or patches or any of those other methods. Maybe I didn't believe in them. I'm not sure why I didn't do it at that time. I guess we thought we could master it by willpower. We failed every time we tried. When I was 30 years old, I took a job in Japan teaching English as a second language. It was this hitting reset on your life move where I'd been working in a cubicle in Toronto and it was okay, but it wasn't my dream. And I thought, I'm going to do this thing that's totally different, change everything. And so I moved to Japan and hey, great news. In Japan, cigarettes are even cheaper than they were in the States for, I think they were about $2.50 a pack. And so my habit continued there. It was very easy to afford it. I was making more money than I ever did in Canada because I never really earned much money working the office jobs I had in my 20s, always kind of struggling. But when I went to Japan, I was getting paid quite well because of the taxes there. You end up keeping most of what you make. And the cost of living was, and actually still is, really, really cheap, despite what you hear about Japan. People say it's like the big airport because everything's so expensive. But really, once you live there, it's not bad at all. And poisons like alcohol and cigarettes, really, really cheap. So I was smoking like crazy. I stayed in Japan for about 6 years. But in my 5th year, I was 35 years old then. I had this moment. My girlfriend and I traveled to Okinawa, which was kind of the Hawaii of Japan. It's kind of a place you go for some sun, and we'd never been there. And we were always trying to travel around in country. So we went to Okinawa. For some reason, and I don't know why, I didn't smoke for 2 days. I think there was maybe a day of flights. There was another day where I don't even remember. Something happened that just made me spend 2 days without smoking. I must have just been busy and doing something else. And I realized after that second day, like, oh, this is accidentally a head start I've been gifted by just sheer luck. I wasn't planning. I'd been thinking about smoking and maybe half-heartedly trying for years without success. And here I was like, okay, I've got 2 days ahead of cold turkey, which I thought about but never had the guts to go for. And I was like, well, 2 days better than no days. I wonder, could I make it 3? And so just went another day without smoking. It wasn't that hard. And then I thought, well, maybe I could make it to the end of this trip. And so I did that. I'm sure my girlfriend at the time was very nervous about me getting irritable and stuff. I can't remember if I was, but I made it to the end of the trip, came back to where we lived in Japan and been smoke free for a week or so. And then I thought very seriously, like, okay, this isn't a game or can I make it one more day anymore? Now I'm really going to do it. I don't think I'd really thought about doing it seriously. But now with 7 days in, it was the longest I'd gone and it didn't feel that tough, mostly because I'd kept busy, traveling, you're doing stuff all the time. There was always a diversion and I didn't have to think about smoking. I wasn't bored and I wasn't working, which was important too, because I was definitely on the rewarding myself for working with cigarettes. I'd work a few hours, have a cigarette, work a few hours, have a cigarette, which is a really bad habit to get into because you start to need that reward. Traveling made it a little bit easier. And once I had that week behind me, I was like, I can definitely do this now. And I thought, I think I've cracked the code for me. I think it's probably different for everybody. You've obviously heard a million stories about what works for different people. But for me, what it was, I had to build this investment in not smoking for it to become worth it. And every day I didn't smoke was like building a pile of little accomplishments. And the higher that pile of little accomplishments, like days not smoked, got, the bigger the incentive was to not topple that pile and have to start from the very beginning. That's what drove me forward for every day and every week and every month, because eventually it did get really hard to not smoke. Like the physical and the psychological cravings, they absolutely came. But by then, I had that investment, that little tower of days past that I didn't want to lose them. And every day I could add to that pile of days, my reason to remain smoke free got taller and taller along with that. I'm using my hands on a podcast. Anyway, but hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully this makes sense. And eventually I got to a month and 2 months. And by now I was feeling it. Definitely irritable, grumpy, as you like, at work, probably very unpleasant to be around with my coworkers. I was teaching there. Maybe my students could feel it off me as well. I don't know. But I knew that for every week or even month eventually that I went, then I would have to redo it all. So like the sort of the suffering that I was going through in the physical and the psychological withdrawal, I was only passing more of that time. And I knew that if I went back to smoking, I would go back to square one and I would have to do it all again, so the longer I could suffer, in a way, the better, because it was always a bigger reason to not start smoking again. And in my head, I remember somebody had said, you'll stop craving in about 3 months. You'll stop thinking about it in about 3 months. And I can tell you that was not true at all in my case, at all. And I'm sorry for listeners. I'm going to give the hard truth right now. At least in my case, it took a year.
Yeah.
It took
Same.
it took a year of wanting to smoke before I stopped wanting it anymore. But there's a good news to this too. So keep listening, folks.
Before we jump back into the show, I have an important announcement for those of you considering a permanent shift. I want to talk to you about personal coaching. As we look ahead to 2026, I'm planning some incredible expansions to my one-on-one program to help you quit smoking for good. And because of this, the investment for personal coaching packages will be increasing starting January 1st. If you've been listening to these stories and realizing that you're ready to commit to the deep, personalized work required to finally move on from smoking, this is your chance to lock in your coaching at the current 2025 rate. Don't wait until New Year. Start your transformation now and save. You can find the link to book a free connection call and learn more in today's show notes. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Because as you're quitting, you think, I'll never not want to smoke again. You really believe that very strongly. It is permanent, but actually it's not true. You do get over it, and you do get to a point where you don't want it anymore. And even being in a cloud of someone else's secondhand smoke is a turnoff. Don't want to be around that. And it's not because it's a temptation. It's because it's gross. You start to smell what other people were smelling that you were immune to while you were smoking, all that stuff. And so now, since I was 35 and I quit cold turkey in Okinawa, I haven't had a single cigarette. And after I hit about that 1 year mark, I have completely not wanted one. It hasn't been difficult or a sacrifice at all, but it did take about a year to reach that point.
That's such an inspiration to have that vision for ourselves of like what we're moving towards, because it is hard when you're in it and you're just like, how am I ever going to be normal again?
Right,
And
right.
I think that's so important that you can paint that picture of what can happen, because it's so beautiful when you get to the other side. You don't know what
It
it's going
is.
to be, because it took me a year as well. So I think that's
Uh-huh.
kind of maybe a normal
I
thing.
saw you nodding along, and I thought,
Yeah.
yes, she understands. And I do think it's different for everybody. But
Yes.
but yeah, that was our experience, right?
I
Yeah.
like the inertia of your story that you were just, let's see, and had that curiosity, because I think that's so important to come from that place of just like, what would happen? What would it look like? What would it feel like? And then
Mm-hmm.
that sense of accomplishment, like, wow, I'm doing it. I'm going to keep going. I want to keep going. And just to like nitpick one part of that story, what did you do with that
Mm-hmm.
relationship with work? When you were used to having a break, rewarding yourself, how were you able to
Yeah.
shift that pattern to where you were able to work without smoking?
Well, because it was such a part of my work routine, I would teach a couple of lessons, and then we would go up on the roof of this private school where I was at and have a cigarette and come back down and teach again. Now I wonder if the students thought I stunk. Maybe they all smoked too and didn't notice. But the answer to the question is, I kind of had to burn that bridge, but it was a burnable bridge for me, because the nature of the work that I was doing was that every year I would move to a different city and start again at a new school with an entirely new staff and an entirely new set of students. And I'll be honest, I think that really helped me, because I knew that even if I was grumpy at work and irritable and giving off bad vibe, and I'm sure I was, that I could walk away from that and never have to work in that environment again. It might have been a different story if I was in my forever job, where I knew this has an end date and I can walk away. And if I could make it to the end of my contract at that school, by then I hoped I would be smoke free for real. And then the next place that I started, I could just be smoke free teacher John, and it would be cool and no trouble. Again, it was a kind of a very specific situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, I've never thought about it before, but I think that the circumstances around my quitting smoking had way more to do with being at the right point in my life with the right circumstances, and much less than even my desire to quit. I mean, it was there, but wasn't that powerful. I wasn't even quitting for my health. I'll be perfectly honest. I was quitting because I hated giving part of my paycheck to big tobacco. And I thought, I'm kind of a slave to this drug. And that bothered me much more than this will kill me one day. It's totally not reasonable at all, but that is where my head was at. I guess I was young enough to still feel pretty invulnerable.
Right. We all push away that part of smoking, or we wouldn't
Sure.
do it. or try it or have anything to do with it. I think a lot of us think that we're invincible or it won't happen to us or make up whatever excuse we need. But yeah, there's no wrong motivation by any means. So how did you take that freedom then? How did that feel to be free, to not have to be a slave?
It felt fantastic. And again, for anyone listening who wants this, I can tell you for sure, like, I think everyone can do it. May just need the right circumstances to get there. When I look back at my life, boy, I'm starting to feel very philosophical. I'm just over 50 now, for context. When I look back, quitting smoking at 35 is actually one of the things that I am most proud of doing in my whole life. And I feel like I've done all kinds of cool and weird and different things, but quitting smoking is one of those things like, I did that on my own for myself. That is actually a powerful thing that it makes you feel like you can do really anything that you set your mind to. This is starting to feel very cheesy. Anyway, it's true. It's true. Cheesy or not, it is true. You do get that feeling like if I can do that, then I could do whatever I want to do. I can put my mind to stuff and make things happen.
There really is a resilience and confidence to it. That was one of the biggest benefits that I never foresaw. I didn't realize how good I would feel about myself after quitting. It is a major accomplishment and a turning point in my life, so I can resonate a lot.
Huge. And you can feel the difference in health after as well, because I wonder if you'll relate to this. But when I was smoking, probably for the last 10 years, between ages 25 and 35, I would want to smoke, have a cigarette, and while I was smoking, want a cigarette. I would explain it to people like trying to fill a hole with antimatter. Like you're shoveling stuff into this hole to try and fill it and satisfy this thing that feels like it's missing, but every shovelful actually just makes the hole bigger. That's how I felt about smoking the whole time. Like I would have a cigarette because my body said, you need this, and then having it would actually make me want more, like another one. It's a very strange thing, but I guess that's how addiction works in general, right?
Yeah, it was never enough. And you didn't want the feeling to end. That
Right.
initial high you get from it that is so brief.
Right.
So
Yeah.
brief.
And really, it would make you feel kind of tired and a bit dirty and stinky. It could almost feel like the oxygen getting sucked out of your body. I would kind of feel like a little sleepy-headed by having a cigarette. And I think it was just the oxygen being sucked out of my blood by the cigarettes.
Yeah, so many drawbacks to it when you start to pay attention and really notice. So I think that a lot of us can get disconnected from our bodies, from the signals that's telling us, hey, don't smoke. Did you find that for yourself too? Did you come back online and maybe have a different connection with your body, with your intuition, with your emotions?
I used to take it for granted that in the winters, in Canada, the winters are pretty severe. And so every winter, me and all of my smoking roommates, we would kind of get like this bronchitis. I'm not going to be too graphic on your show, but you'd be coughing up all kinds of nasty stuff. And you'd probably have this jar of cigarette butts and phlegm that's just been sitting on the front porch. It's disgusting, but you do it anyway, and you just kind of accept it. But after I quit smoking, that completely went away. I mean, no brainer, right? But I guess I wasn't expecting to feel healthier. Again, going back to, I didn't quit for health reasons, but I got to say the health benefits are nice and they are noticeable. But for me, it's the psychological part that's really more meaningful, that now I'm not a slave to the tobacco companies having to hand over a part of my paycheck to them really for nothing good.
Let's talk more about that emotional side too, because you said that you had a lot of anger, or you said that you were grumpy and maybe less patient with other people. So do you feel like that has changed your relationship with your
For
emotions
sure.
and your regulation with it?
Yeah, I know. I'm sure that that was completely chemical. It lasted a lot longer than I expected. As I said, it wasn't like 3 months before I kind of equalized. It was probably a year. I don't want to say I was in a bad mood for a year because that's kind of unrealistic and not true, but I was more irritable more often for that year. And I think I found things in my work. I mentioned that there was a contract that was ending, and I would go from school to school and contract to contract. But I started to really want that contract to be over. And I think I started to dislike it. But again, I think that was just my body saying, you've deprived me of this thing, and it being angry about that and sort of it just coming out in my mood. I can remember distinctly I had to take a train to get to work, and I would pass by Mount Fuji all the time. And you'd think that looking at this vista, you would just be like filled with, angel singing and everything would be wonderful. But I would be like more often grumpy and irritable. Like I just didn't want to be going to work, seeing those people, maybe the students that were not as much fun to teach, because sometimes you would get some that were difficult. I would dread them more. Or the coworkers that I didn't like, I would like like them less, or the things that they would say would bother me more. I can remember I had this one coworker who was another foreigner like myself. Well, he thought he was a comedian, and I remember I didn't think he was very funny, but a few months in, I really didn't think he was funny, and I couldn't stand to be around this guy. And I probably was pretty mean to him, I'll be honest. Did he deserve that? Maybe a little bit. He was maybe genuinely annoying,
Right.
but I think it was amplified to me, and I think I probably just could not suffer him. I had no patience for him at all. Matt, if you're listening, my apologies.
We're not our best when we're making major
Right?
changes like that. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, back when you were a smoker, would you smoke when you were angry? Was that a coping tool for you to deal with anger?
I don't think I was a very angry person when I was a smoker. I think I was a pretty chilled guy, but I smoked, as I say, mostly it was on that reward system.
Okay.
Whatever job I had at the time, or if I was a student, study for an hour, have a cigarette. Maybe even something as ridiculous as like go to the gym for an hour, have a cigarette.
Hmm.
But it was always like, do this work, have this reward, which really motivated me at the time, but it was terribly dangerous in a way that I didn't see while I was doing it, because it was really reinforcing that bad habit. Because, of course, when it was gone, you expect, I did this work, where's my reward? And I would really notice that it was missing.
Yeah.
But again, that first week, I don't know what magic it was. It just wasn't hard for the first week. It did get hard after that, but that first week, for some reason, I just didn't have to try very hard. And the first couple of days was nothing. I didn't even notice it happened by accident.
That's amazing because that is the most difficult time for many of us. And I think that a lot of that has to do with our environment. It's hard when we're in
Hmm.
familiar patterns to not go back to the thing that we're used to. So that makes sense to me. Yeah, I was just asking about the emotions because I found that I was suppressing a lot of my emotions with smoking. It kind of made me more chill, like more kind of numbed out. And so when I quit, then I had to deal with all those emotions that came up that I've been putting down for a long time. And that was the hard part, was learning how to face those and regulate. But I did find that I was able to have more joy when I allowed myself to
Hmm.
have anger. They kind of go together. And so I didn't know if
Right.
that was part of your experience too.
Well, you saying this does make me think, and this is stuff I haven't thought about for a while. It's coming back now. But smoking used to be a really useful social tool. So, speaking of the emotional part, it definitely made me feel like I always could at least look like I belonged in a place. If you go to a party, you don't really know anybody, you could have a cigarette. No, now I'm doing something. Now I don't look or feel awkward. And that would translate into almost any social situation. It would be easier if I had a cigarette. And this was back where you could, I don't know what it's like in the States. In Canada, though, you can't smoke in bars and you haven't been able to for a while. But at that time, you totally could. And so if I was at a bar or a club or whatever, a concert, then having a cigarette would always make you feel like I'm not just standing here doing nothing, I'm having a cigarette. And that is something. And you would feel like you belonged, like you had something going on. It even kind of looked cool, or at least I thought it did at the time.
Yeah, it makes us feel safe. It can be a
Hmm.
protection. You've got a lot of gems throughout your story, but someone that's listening, they're struggling, they're in it. What piece of advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert because I can only talk about what's worked for me. And I bet it's different for everybody. Something that I maybe should have tried and didn't was to get some kind of help. I don't know why I didn't, but I would suggest if somebody's trying to quit and is struggling to do that, there might be medications or even something like the patch or whatever, or gum that will work for them. It might at least be worth a try, even if it doesn't work. But I can say definitely in my case, it was a question of having the right situation for it to happen. Like you'd mentioned before, if you're in your routine, that's got to be the hardest time. So if you're just living your life, doing the things that you always do, and you're thinking, I want to quit, at least for me, that would be the most difficult time to do it. But if you're planning a vacation or you're going to switch up your life in some kind of radical way, even for a little while, I think that's the time to give it a shot, because you're going to be distracted. If it's travel, you're distracted by seeing all the new things and the excitement of traveling. Maybe it's a new job or a new city. You're going to be distracted by doing well at your new job or fitting in the new city or whatever. But having something else going on that's outside of your regular life that you can think about, again, just for me, that's the best time to make it happen. And then once you start to build that mountain of days not smoked, then hopefully that calculus will work for your listeners in the same way that it did for me. Every day was one more reason to keep going. I knew that if I was to ever smoke again, I would never quit because I couldn't go through that twice.
Yeah.
It was at the time, and I don't want to dissuade anybody because quitting is absolutely worth it, but at the time it was very tough. And the thing that kept me going was knowing that this is it. If I don't quit now, I don't think I could go through this deprivation a second time. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because the fact that it is hard is also the thing that makes you succeed, right? Because the farther you go into that cost, so to speak, the more you don't want to have to pay that again in terms of effort.
Yeah, you can look back and see how far you've come. You don't want to go
Yeah.
back.
You don't want to have to do 7 months of withdrawal again. And I think it's really useful to know like there is a finish line. And I mean, for me, it wasn't 3 months, but maybe for someone else it is, or it's 6 months. For me, it was a year. And you were saying for you, it was about a year as well, right?
Right.
But maybe other people, their physiology means it's going to be 6 months or 8 months or 3 months or 2 months. Maybe that finish line is closer. But no matter who you are, there is a finish line. And even when your brain says, I'll never not want a cigarette again, I can say for sure, yes, there is that time. And like you will get there. You just have to get there. And if it's an extra month or an extra 3 months or an extra 6 months of effort, then that's what it is. But it is a price worth paying.
Absolutely. Thank you. Wise words. I'm wondering, how can our listeners get in touch with you? And do you want to talk more about your work and your podcast?
I would love to. So I run a podcast. It's very niche. It's like a Dungeons and Dragons podcast. Listeners of yours who know what that is probably are aware of these things called actual plays, where people play the game on mic and they laugh, and you can kind of enjoy. It's like a spectator sport for a role-playing game. It's a hugely popular thing. The one that I do is a little different though. It's a hybrid audio drama along with a little bit of game playing in it. So really it's closer to Game of Thrones, the audio drama, or Lord of the Rings, the audio drama. So if any of your listeners either remember playing Dungeons and Dragons fondly when they were kids and want to get that nostalgia hit, or if they enjoy dark fantasy things like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, my podcast is called Tale of the Manticore. It is for a mature audience. I would say PG-13. There is a lot of violence and a considerable amount of like horror in it, I guess. So it's for adults. But yeah, if your listeners are into Dungeons and Dragons or enjoy dark fantasy, I would love for them to check out my show, Tale of the Manticore.
I took a listen myself. It was kind of fun. It's not totally my thing, but
It's not your thing.
I like
Okay.
stories. I was like on the
I
edge
mean,
of my
if it made
seat.
any sense to you, then I think that's a huge win. If you don't know what the source material really is, but you still understood what was happening, that's a win.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
I
That's
was
great.
like, what's going to happen? I was into it. So it's definitely, and
Right
then
on.
the voice acting is phenomenal.
Thanks. It's grown over. I've been doing it for 5 years now. And so now that I've kind of established somewhat, I've got some professional voice actors, and I'm lucky enough that they volunteer. They just found the show and liked it. And so I've got some professional voice actors as well as some amateurs as well. And I try and go as full production as I can. So it's music and sound effects, and I try and make it as immersive as I can.
It's really neat and special. And thank you so much for
Thanks.
coming on here and sharing your story with us. I know different stories hit people in different ways, and that you've added to the wisdom of the show. And thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. To all your listeners, if whoever's thinking, I wish you all the best of luck. And, here's one more voice to say that it can be done. If I can do it, anyone can do it, to be honest.
Well, thank you, everyone. Take care. I'll see you next week. Bye. Hey, you made it to the very end. If you're listening, you likely heard my announcement earlier and you're seriously considering change. Don't let this be just another thought. I know that you can move past your deepest blocks and fully enjoy your life without relying on smoking anymore. I'm ready to support you through the tough stuff in coaching. Remember, prices are going up after the new year, so please book a free connection call now to secure the current rate. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.